Good evening, teens and tweens, and welcome to another edition of TNT. Tonight's lesson is A Time for Everything. Before we get started tonight, we are coming off Memorial Day weekend, and I want to take the time to thank all the servicemen and women of the armed forces and tell them thank you for your service. More importantly, I want to thank John and thank him so much for his service and time that he served in war. I'd also just like to say thank you to my father, Eugene, who served in the Korean War in the Navy. My brother served in the Army, and my uncle Buddy, Archie J. Roberts, fell in the line of duty during the Vietnam War. Thank you all, servicemen and women. To open up tonight's lesson, a band, The Byrds, wrote and released a song in December 6, 1965 called Turn, Turn, Turn. The lyrics of this song are almost taken verbatim from the book of Ecclesiastes that was found in the King James Version of the Bible on page 1611. It was taken from chapter 3, verses 1 through 8, though the sequence of the words were rearranged for the song. You'll see a link for the song down below. Watch it as a prep for this lesson. Tonight's reading will be from Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. Starting in verse 1. There is an appointed time for everything, and there is a time for every event under heaven. A time to give birth and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to shun embracing, a time to search and a time to give up those lost, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear apart and a time to sew together, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. The point King Solomon is making in this passage of scripture is that God has plans for all his people. Thus he provides cycles of life, each with its work for us to do. And although we may face many problems that seem to contradict God's plan, these should not be barriers to believing in him, but rather opportunities to discover that without God, life's problems have no lasting solutions. Timing is important. All the experiences listed in these verses are appropriate at certain times. The secret to peace with God is to discover, accept, and appreciate God's perfect timing. This can lead to despair, rebellion, or moving ahead without his advice. Verse 7 states, as we look deeper into this verse, a time to tear apart and a time to sew together, a time to be silent and a time to speak. Cross-referencing this verse with another verse from Amos 5:13 states, therefore at such a time the prudent person keeps silent, for it is an evil time. There are times that we should be quiet and times that we should speak. As believers, when are those times? Times to be silent and times to speak up. Prudent is defined as acting or showing care and thought for the future. In other words, to be wise. We have to remember that what we say in any situation affects our witness. This can go hand in hand even with our actions. Looking deeper into verse 8 states, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. When is the time to hate? We shouldn't hate evil people, but we should hate what they do. We should also hate it when people are mistreated, when children are starving, and when God is being dishonored. In addition, we must hate sin in our lives, and this is God's attitude. Also looking at Psalms 5:5, it states, the arrogant cannot stand in your presence. You hate all who do wrong. You see, God cannot condone or excuse even the smallest sin. Therefore, we cannot excuse ourselves for sinning only a little bit. As we grow in our relationship with God, our sensitivity to sin increases. So what is your reaction to sin in your life? Are you insensitive, unconcerned, disappointed, or comfortable? As God makes us aware of sin, we must be intolerant toward it and be willing to change. You see, all believers should strive to be more tolerant of people, but less tolerant of the sin in themselves and others. Tonight's closing verse and discussion comes from Ecclesiastes 8:6, which states, "For there is a proper time and procedure for every delight, though a man's trouble is heavy upon him." As believers, we have to accept God's timing. As tough as it is, and even I'll admit that, we have to have patience. However, our sin can carry a lot of weight. Again, going back to the previous question, what reaction do you draw from your sin? Observing verse 7, when should we remain silent and when should we make our voice heard? And lastly, during this time of a pandemic and social isolation, what time is this for us as believers? Again, guys, I love you. I can't wait to see you. I feel like it is drawing closer that we're going to get to have church together. I'm praying for you. Know that you are loved. God bless you all. See you Wednesday night. For more information on Aztec Church of the Nazarene, please visit our Facebook page and email us. God bless.